I am going to show you how I make a simple open crumb sourdough bread. Open crumb sourdough gives you the airy interior and the rustic aesthetic that every baker dreams of. So let's make it happen. This bread will be 20% whole wheat flour and 80% bread flour. We will use a 20% levain inoculation, a 2% salt level, and an 80% hydration. If you don't know what some of those terms mean, you can check out this video for a full breakdown of different sourdough terms. I start by feeding my starter, Genevieve, a 1-to-2 ratio. That means for my 50 grams of starter, I am giving her 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water. Depending on the strength of your starter, you may need to do this step a couple hours before your Autolyse, but I am actually feeding her at the same time that I am starting my Autolyse. I can do this because I know that she'll be peaked in about 3 hours. I continue by autolysing the flour and water by combining 75 grams of whole wheat flour, 260 grams of bread flour, and 260 grams of room temperature water. Pre-soaking these ingredients really helps the gluten development and dough extensibility. When you get a head start on the process before adding the starter and the salt, you actually have a better chance of maximizing the open crumb in your loaf. I will stir these ingredients together until there are no dry clumps of flour left. I stir until the ingredients come together. I'm not looking to lift and fold here, just combining them together. I make sure to get every bit of flour so that there are no unhydrated bits that I have to deal with later in the lift and folds. This is what the dough will look like after you finish mixing it. The gluten is not developed yet, so the dough breaks right away if you try to extend it. As the water hydrates the flour, the glutenin and gliadin link together to start forming the gluten strands. I will show you in 3 hours what the gluten looks like when I try to extend it again after it has had that time to develop. Cover your dough and let it rest for 2 to 4 hours. Now that my dough has been developing for about 3 hours, I'm going to show you what the window pane looks like now as compared to before. The window pane is when you can stretch the dough very thin and the light can pass through it like a sheet of glass. When I pull the dough, it does not break. It can spread to a see-through window pane without tearing, so now I know that it has developed enough. This means it is time to add the leaven. Add 70 grams of active starter to your dough. With my wet hand, I spread the starter over the dough and begin to mix it in for a couple of minutes. I will continue to mix the dough together until it feels cohesive. Once the dough feels strong, I will cover it and leave it alone for a half an hour. Now that the dough has rested for half an hour, I am going to add the salt to the mixture. I am adding 2% salt, which is about 7 grams. I will then wet my hand and begin dimpling in the salt to the dough. I then start hand mixing the dough together, which is actually not very difficult because the dough is so high hydration or so wet that the ingredients blend together pretty easily. The salt will tighten the dough, slow down fermentation, and give my dough more structure. My dough feels fantastic, but if I felt like it was overly tight, I could add a teaspoon of water at a time to get it back to feeling normal. What that normal feeling is will definitely become easier to tell the more that you bake, but basically, you want your dough to be malleable but with structure. After a couple minutes, I can feel and see that the salt is fully incorporated. So I am going to cover the dough and let it rest for another half an hour. Now that my dough has rested for another half an hour, I am going to do a counter fold. With my wet hand, I am going to gently guide my dough onto a slightly wet countertop. With a wet bench scraper, I am going to release the top of the dough from the counter and then pull it all the way down to the bottom of the dough. I then repeat that same process on all 4 sides of the dough. I turn my dough over and ball it up, then place it back in the bowl covered for another half an hour. After this half an hour rest, I am going to once again gently lower the dough onto a slightly wet countertop. Now I am going to scrape the top up and then use my hands to lift the dough and pull it outwards. I am going to pull from the middle of the dough, not from the edges. This helps spread the dough out evenly instead of just pulling at the sides, which will end up tearing the dough. I will continue to do this until a big rectangle has formed. Then I will simply fold in from the side 1/3 and then the other side 1/3, then fold the top down halfway and finally the bottom up over the top. During all of this, I am popping any air bubbles that I see emerge. Now I gently place my dough back into the same bowl or a new clean dish and cover it for 45 minutes. It is finally time for my first lift and fold. See how the dough has lost its structure and is completely relaxed compared to before? I am going to use my wet hand and reach under the side of the dough. I then lift that side of the dough up until I feel that it has a good stretch, and then place it down on the opposite side of the dish. I continue to do this all the way around the dish until the dough does not stretch upward with any length anymore. Now you can see that my dough is strongly holding its shape again. I cover my dough and let it rest for another 45 minutes. After those 45 minutes have passed, I will perform my second lift and fold. I will perform my second lift and fold by doing the exact same method as the first time. I am once again giving my dough structure, and while I do not see much rise from the dough at this time, I can see that it is beginning to become a stronger dough than it was before. With a wet and extensible dough like this, sometimes it needs 4 or more folds before the shaping. It all depends on how the dough feels. I am covering my dough again for another 45 minutes. It is time for the last lift and fold for this dough. I can already see that it has begun to rise a little bit, which is fantastic. It is easy to tell that the dough is not relaxing and spreading as much as it was before, which means that the strength and structure is developing. This is the last lift and fold that this dough needs, but if you feel like your dough is too flexible and stretchy and has no tightness when worked, you may need to add 1 or maybe 2 more lift and folds, and that is okay. I am covering my dough up and going to let it bulk rise for most likely another 2 or 3 more hours. If you would like more help with the sourdough schedule, just check out the link in the description where I have my free sourdough schedules for you. It has been 3 hours, so now I can see that my dough looks airy, looks like it has grown in size, and looks ready to shape. I am lightly flouring my working surface and then gently helping the dough release from the bowl. Your dough should fall out of the dish just like this. If it is sticky and leaves strands behind, it is most likely over fermented, but no worries, it will still make great bread. Using my bench scraper, I will move some flour under the bottom of the dough before getting rid of the extra flour on the counter. I do this so that the bottom of the dough will not stick to the counter while the top of the dough does stick when I shape it. Get under the top of the dough and then use my hands to stretch the dough out and then pull it to the center of the dough. I will now do the same to the bottom of the dough and pat it down flat. Get under the side of the dough and gently but firmly roll the dough down and seal it at the end by using my fingers to push it against the counter. Then I will seal the sides of the dough using my fingers to pinch it together. I then flip my dough and gently place it seam side up in my floured banneton. I cover my dough and leave it out at room temperature for about 15 to 25 minutes and then place it in my fridge for an overnight retard. Make sure that your fridge is colder than 38 or 39 degrees, or else it will continue to proof and rise through the night. If your fridge is warmer than that, shorten your bulk rise so you do not over ferment your dough. The next morning, I preheat my oven at 450 degrees with my Dutch oven inside for 45 minutes. I then dropped my dough as I was taking it out of the fridge, but you can skip that step. I flip my dough onto parchment paper. I score it with a slice at a 45-degree angle, but you can do whatever designs or decorations that you would like to. I always make sure to give my bread a great score so that the steam and the gases have a proper channel to escape from the dough. If you don't give it a great score, the gas and the steam will end up bursting open at random places. I place my loaf in the oven and bake for 22 minutes with the lid on. After the timer goes off, I remove the lid and see the amazing oven spring. I bake for another 10 to 15 minutes at 400 degrees until the bread is perfectly golden brown. Now I get to remove it from the oven and let it rest for at least an hour to let the crumbs set properly. I love the way that this loaf looks. It has a great ear and lovely oven spring. The smell and crinkle when you press on it are exactly what you want from your sourdough. After slicing this bread, you can see how amazing the open crumb is. It goes all the way through. The crumb is perfectly soft, exactly what we were going for. The crust is crispy and the loaf as a whole is just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out this video if you want to avoid common sourdough mistakes. Check out the link in the description if you want the free sourdough schedules, and I will see you next time.